The wind howled across the frozen plains, cutting through the heavy layers of snow that blanketed the rugged mountains. The icy gusts rattled the wooden shutters of the old ranch house, carrying with them a biting chill that seeped through every corner of the room. She shivered uncontrollably, wrapping her arms around herself, her breaths forming clouds in the frigid air. The cowboy stood silently by the hearth, his tall frame leaning against the worn wooden mantel, his eyes tracing the faint patterns of frost creeping along the window. She had been brought here against her will, or at least that was how she felt. Her fingers trembled, not just from the cold but from a deep, gnawing fear of what her life had become. She had lived all her life in the warmth of a bustling town, with laughter and light filling every room, and now she was stranded in this icy wasteland, surrounded by towering snow-laden pines and the deafening silence of the mountains. "You can send me back," she said at last, her voice cracking like thin ice underfoot. She avoided his gaze, afraid of the steely calm in his eyes, the quiet assurance that seemed to weigh heavier than the mountains themselves. "I don't belong here. I can't stay." Her words floated in the cold air, almost swallowed by the roar of the wind outside. The cowboy didn't reply immediately. He just watched her, a faint curl of smoke from his pipe drifting lazily above his head, the amber glow from the hearth dancing across his rugged features. His eyes, a shade darker than the stormy winter sky, were full of a patient, unwavering intensity. There was something in him that demanded she meet his gaze, some invisible tether that drew her out of herself. Finally he spoke, his voice low and measured, like gravel sliding over frozen stone. "You don't understand," he said. "This isn't about what you want." He stepped closer, the wooden floor groaning under his heavy boots. "It's about what matters. And what matters is my daughter." She froze, her eyes widening as a wave of confusion and fear swept through her. "Your daughter?" she whispered, the words catching in her throat. She had known this man was formidable, feared even, in the small mountain town, but she had never guessed the depths of his life, the quiet, unspoken attachments that had nothing to do with her. The cowboy nodded, his face softening slightly. "Yes," he said. "She's the one who chose you." His words hit her like a sudden gust of icy wind, knocking the breath out of her. She stumbled back a step, clutching the edge of a table for support. Her mind raced. She had never been chosen for anything, never truly belonged anywhere. Always overlooked, always sent away, and now, this girl, his daughter, had chosen her. Her heart thumped wildly. A mixture of disbelief, fear, and something she could not yet name. She wanted to protest, to run, to deny the impossible claim he was making. But the fire crackling in the hearth cast shadows on the walls, dancing like spirits in the dim room, and somehow it made her pause. The cowboy reached out, just a hand hovering near hers, not touching, but close enough that the warmth of his presence seemed to seep through the icy air. "I know you feel trapped," he said. "I know it seems impossible. But my daughter, she has seen something in you that even I couldn't ignore." He leaned against the doorway, silhouetted against the white, storm-swept wilderness outside. "You can fight it if you want. You can run. But understand this, she's already made her choice. And I respect that choice." His words were calm, almost hypnotic, yet carried the weight of a mountain avalanche, inescapable, overwhelming. She sank onto a chair, her knees trembling, snowflakes melting on her coat, dripping cold water down her arms. Her mind raced with memories of the girl, bright-eyed, stubborn, fearless, so unlike the fragile warmth she had been used to in her old life. And yet, there was an undeniable spark of hope. If the daughter had chosen her, perhaps there was a place she could belong, even in this icy wilderness where survival meant more than just warmth and food. Perhaps she was stronger than she thought. But the fear of the unknown, the fear of the harsh, merciless winter that stretched beyond the walls kept her voice small. I don't know if I can stay," she admitted, her breath visible in the freezing air. The cowboy didn't force her to answer. Instead, he walked over to the window, peering out into the storm-laden valley. "It's not easy," he said quietly. "Nothing here is easy. Winter doesn't forgive weakness. But what we have, what my daughter believes in, can endure anything. It can survive the cold, the snow, even the silence." His voice held a strange comfort, a promise that transcended words, echoing through the icy room. He turned to her then, the firelight reflecting in his eyes. "I've fought every winter of my life," he said, "and I've learned that the right people make it worth enduring the storm. She looked at him then, for the first time really looked, and saw not a harsh mountain man, but someone fiercely protective, someone whose loyalty ran deeper than any winter freeze, and somewhere in that gaze she began to feel warmth. A spark in the frozen landscape of her heart. The wind outside roared again, rattling the shutters, but inside, in that dimly lit room, the first fragile tendrils of hope began to grow. She could feel it, the possibility that maybe, just maybe, she had been brought here for a reason, that this winter, this cold, this fear, was part of something larger, something she was only beginning to understand. And as the storm raged on outside, blanketing the world in white and ice, she realized the truth of his words. The daughter had chosen her, and perhaps in the heart of the frozen wilderness, she might finally find a place to belong. But the night was long, the mountains unforgiving, and the path ahead uncertain, and in the icy stillness she wondered if she could find the courage to face not just the cold, but the powerful unspoken forces that had brought her here, to a destiny she had never imagined. The fire crackled again, shadows flickering across the walls, and for the first time she didn't shrink from the unknown. She felt it, a strange, thrilling anticipation of what the next day, the next storm, might bring. The next morning dawned over the frozen ridge like a pale, bruised sun struggling through a thick blanket of snow-laden clouds. Frost clung to every branch, every rock, and the air was so sharp it seemed to slice through her lungs with every breath. She wrapped herself tighter in the heavy coat the cowboy had insisted she wear, the wool cutting into her skin, but offering a semblance of warmth against the merciless wind. The mountains were alive with the sound of cracking ice and shifting snow, as though the earth itself was reminding her that this was no gentle place, no forgiving world. And yet, despite the biting cold, a strange sense of purpose settled over her. She had survived this long, had made it through a night of terror and confusion, and perhaps now she could find her footing in this frozen, unyielding land. She stepped outside into the blinding white, snow crunching under her boots, and saw the cowboy already there, his figure a dark silhouette against the glittering expanse. He didn't speak at first, only watched her approach with the quiet, steady presence that had unnerved her the day before. The wind whipped around them, tearing at their clothes and stinging exposed skin. Yet there was a calm between them now, a fragile understanding. She could feel it in the way he didn't look away, in the way his eyes softened as they met hers, a silent reassurance that this was where she belonged. And then, unexpectedly, she smiled. It was small, hesitant, but genuine, a fragile flicker of warmth in the frozen morning. "My daughter, she chose you," he said again, his voice carrying over the wind, a low rumble like distant thunder. The words made her stop mid-step, her heart thumping violently. She wanted to ask why, to demand answers, but the clarity in his gaze silenced her. There was no force in his words, only truth, and it resonated deep within her, bypassing fear and doubt and landing squarely in a place she hadn't known existed. She had always been an outsider, always someone left behind, and now she realized she had been chosen in the most extraordinary way, by someone who mattered more than she could yet comprehend. The mountains around them seemed to echo it, the wind carrying the message that some bonds were forged not by convenience, but by destiny. He beckoned her toward the small cabin nestled at the edge of the ridge, its roof weighed down with thick snow, smoke curling lazily from the chimney. Inside, the warmth of a roaring fire greeted her, cutting through the cold and seeping into her frozen limbs. She shook off the snow and took a deep breath, watching him as he moved with deliberate, practiced motions to tend the fire, his presence commanding yet somehow gentle. The silence between them was comfortable, charged with an unspoken understanding. Finally, she dared to speak. I don't even know her," she admitted, her voice barely above the crackle of the flames. How could she choose me?" The cowboy paused, turning to face her fully, the firelight dancing across his rugged features. "She's seen you," he said simply. "Not the scared, lost version you think you are. She's seen the person you could be, the strength you don't even realize you have. That's why she chose you." His words were a balm to her frayed nerves, yet they also carried weight, a challenge she could not ignore. She wanted to protest, to cling to her old life and its familiar uncertainties, but the warmth in his eyes, the conviction in his voice, and the quiet insistence of the mountains beyond made her pause. She felt a shiver that had nothing to do with the cold, a thrill that coursed through her like molten fire beneath frozen earth. Days passed in the relentless rhythm of winter. She learned to navigate the icy terrain, to read the sky for signs of incoming storms, to anticipate the dangers lurking beneath snow-laden trails. And through it all, the cowboy was there, a silent guardian, his presence both reassuring and demanding. He taught her how to handle a rifle in the bitter cold, how to coax life from frozen soil, how to survive when the wind howled like a pack of wolves across the ridges. But he also taught her something more elusive: patience, courage, and the quiet confidence that came from being chosen by someone who truly believed in you. Each lesson, each shared moment, chipped away at the walls she had built around herself, until she began to feel an unfamiliar sensation: trust. And then, as the winter sun struggled over the horizon, she realized something even deeper. She had begun to care for this place, for him, and for the girl who had brought her here through a choice she had never expected. One evening, after a particularly harsh storm had left the ridge, slick with ice and the cabin buried under feet of snow, the cowboy finally spoke of his daughter in a way he hadn't before.
"She's not here," he said, a hint of regret in his voice.
"She's busy with her own life, but she wanted you to know she chose you." The words struck her in a way she could not have anticipated. She had imagined 1,000 scenarios, and in none of them had she imagined being valued, wanted, chosen by someone so fiercely independent, so full of life. Her throat tightened, and for a moment she felt tears sting her eyes. The cold outside was nothing compared to the chill of isolation she had felt all her life, and now finally, she felt a connection that could melt even the harshest frost. The cowboy watched her carefully, noting the subtle changes in her expression, the slight relaxation in her posture, the spark of defiance mixed with vulnerability in her eyes. "You don't have to stay," he said quietly, his voice carrying over the wind that rattled the cabin walls. "But if you choose to, if you stay, know this: my daughter believed in you, and I will too." Her heart raced, the words sinking into her like sunlight through ice, warming. Parts of her she didn't even know were frozen. She wanted to stay. She wanted to embrace the life, the challenge, the unknown that had seemed so terrifying just days ago. And as she looked into his eyes, she realized she was no longer afraid of the winter, or of the mountains, or even of herself. Night fell, and the storm outside softened to a whisper, the snowflakes dancing like fragile spirits in the moonlight. They sat by the fire, the cabin filled with the crackle of burning wood and the quiet hum of understanding. She dared to ask about his daughter again, and he shared stories, tales of laughter and stubbornness, of courage and quiet wisdom, of a girl who had a vision and the strength to pursue it. She listened, captivated, and realized that in these stories, she saw a reflection of herself, of the courage she was only now discovering. And the cowboy, once a towering, intimidating figure, became something more, an anchor in a world that had always felt unsteady, a guide through the icy labyrinth of both the mountains and her own heart. Weeks turned into months, and the winter remained relentless. Yet she no longer dreaded it. She moved through the snow with growing confidence, the sting of cold replaced by a burning sense of purpose. She and the cowboy worked side by side, repairing fences, tending to the small herd of horses, and managing the supplies that were vital for survival. And in the quiet moments when the storm softened to a gentle drift, they would speak in hushed tones, sharing glimpses of their lives, their dreams, and the unspoken bond that had formed between them. She discovered that she was capable of things she had never imagined, of resilience, of courage, of love that defied fear. And through it all, the knowledge that she had been chosen by his daughter guided her, grounding her in a sense of belonging she had never known. One bitterly cold evening, the cowboy took her to the highest ridge, where the moonlight reflected off the icy peaks like 1,000 tiny fires. The wind tore at their clothes, but neither of them spoke, letting the cold, the vastness, and the silence communicate what words could not. Finally, he turned to her, his breath forming a cloud in the freezing air. "She believed you were strong enough," he said simply. "I see it now. I trust you. And I know that together, we can endure anything this winter throws at us." Her heart surged, a warmth that no blizzard could extinguish, and she realized that this was more than survival. This was home. This was family. This was love forged in frost and fire, in courage and trust, in a choice that transcended fear. And as the snow continued to fall, blanketing the world in white, she smiled, no longer shivering from cold or fear. The storm outside was powerful, unyielding, but inside, in the cabin, she was unbreakable. She had been chosen, she had survived, and she had found a place to belong. The winter would rage on. The mountains would remain harsh and unforgiving. But together they could endure anything, and somewhere far away, the daughter who had made the choice would smile, knowing that her faith had brought warmth, courage, and belonging into the heart of a frozen wilderness. The fire crackled, the wind whispered against the walls, and she knew without doubt that she had found something far greater than she could have imagined. Love, trust, and the unwavering belief of a child had changed everything. And as the night deepened, the cowboy reached for her hand, not needing to say anything more, because in the icy, frozen heart of winter, they had found warmth, hope, and a bond that would endure for a lifetime.